Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development Webinar Series. We are pleased to offer this summer series to help you navigate through these unprecedented times. In today's webinar, Father Michael White and Tom Corcoran will discuss how to fund the mission of your parish even during difficult times. My name is Erin Pierce. I am the Parish and Curriculum Marketing Specialist at Ave Maria Press. I would like to recognize our webinar partners, the National Conference for Catechetical Leadership, the National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers, the National Association for Lay Ministry, and the Catholic Campus Ministry Association. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions may be sent to our presenters using the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel, and I'll read as many of those questions as possible at the end of the presentation today. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to you tomorrow via email. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenters today. Father Michael White is a priest of the Archdiocese of Baltimore and pastor of Church of the Nativity in Timonium, Maryland. He earned his bachelor's degree from Loyola University, Maryland, and his graduate degrees in sacred theology and ecclesiology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. During White's tenure as pastor at Church of the Nativity, the church has almost tripled in weekend attendance. More importantly, commitment to the mission of the church has grown, evidenced by the significant increase of giving and service in ministry, and much evidence of genuine spiritual renewal. White is the co-author, along with Tom Corcoran, of Rebuilt, which narrates the story of Nativity's rebirth, Tools for Rebuilding, Rebuilding Your Message, and the Rebuilt Field Guide. Tom Corcoran has served Church of the Nativity in Timonium, Maryland in a variety of roles that give him a unique perspective on parish ministry and leadership. First hired as a youth minister, Corcoran has also served as coordinator of children's ministry and director of small groups. He is lay associate to the pastor and is responsible for weekend message development, strategic planning, and staff development. Father Michael and Tom, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and turn the presenter mode over to you, Tom.
All right.
And then I'll come back on when you all are done.
All right, so Father Michael, if you want to start, go ahead.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us in the midst of a crisis, or a couple of crises now, currently. You know, crises are accelerators. They take established patterns and they speed things up. Even before the COVID-19 crisis hit, many, probably most parishes and dioceses in many, many places across the country and elsewhere were struggling financially, suffering from financial uncertainty and instability. And that was in a healthy economy, perhaps one of the best economies in generations. A lot of parishes were already in a lot of trouble. The current crisis has exacerbated and accelerated those financial problems for many. It's brought us suddenly to a place it might have taken us 5 to 10 years to arrive at otherwise. We are in the future. Our book, Church Money, was originally released last fall, a few months before the outbreak of the pandemic. In the wake of such a huge crisis, it's reasonable to ask, we've asked ourselves, is what we had to say a few months ago still relevant now? And upon reflection, and with great confidence, we would argue that indeed it is. It's actually more important now than ever before because the needs are more pressing than ever before. And the old ways of fundraising and funding parishes, like passing the basket or pitching the in-pew annual appeal just won't meet those needs moving forward. But more importantly, the book remains relevant because it's based on the unchanging Word of God and how God tells us we ought to be funding our mission. Church Money isn't just a book about raising money for mission, though. It's about leadership. And that's really what we're talking about. Leadership is an essential component of financial health. In order for parishes to be financially healthy, pastors, church staff, and volunteer lay councils alike must embrace financial issues as key components to organizational and, more importantly, to spiritual leadership and growth. Leadership will be the core feature of those parishes that successfully navigate this economic crisis. Our credentials for writing this book and being with you this afternoon are simple and not all that impressive. We are not theologians. We are certainly not financial experts, as the guys on our financial team here at the parish would be the first to tell you. Right? We're certainly not consultants either. We're just two guys working in the trenches of a parish for a combined total now of about 45 years. And what we share with you, we share from our own experience. What we've learned, what we know works in the life of a parish. Because one of our great missions, individually and as a parish team, are to help other parishes like you.
So one of the things we have learned, and we'd like to share, first of all, we have to always come back to our why. Why do we exist? And we exist to make disciples, to love God, to love others, and make disciples. And we talk about that through Rebuilt, which is our ministry to help and serve other parishes. We say this, that there are three kind of critical ways in which we are making disciples as a parish. We want to reach outsiders or welcome outsiders into our community. We work to create a great weekend experience, which looks very different right now in the midst of the COVID crisis, and to shape a clear discipleship path for people. That church is simple, but not easy. It's as simple as reaching out to outsiders or welcoming outsiders, people who are not currently in the church. Second, it's creating a great weekend experience to help them, invite them to be a part of. And third, it's shaping a clear discipleship path or way for people to become followers of Jesus Christ, to help them grow, to become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. Those are kind of our three major anchors that we talk about. So looking at shaping a clear discipleship path, we talk about as a parish 5 steps that we want to lead people to, that we think, again, are absolutely crucial to help people grow as followers of Jesus Christ. That as we help people to take these steps, they will become more like Jesus, which of course is the whole point. And so you see them up on your screen. First one is serve in ministry or missions. Jesus said he did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. On the night of the Last Supper, he bends down and he washes the disciples' feet. That ministry is just core to what it means to serve, and to be in ministry is core to what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And so we invite everyone in our parish to serve in some way. And we serve in ministry and or missions. And ministry is what takes place in serving other people in our parish. Missions is how we serve people outside of our parish. The next one's tithe and give, and we're going to spend most of this webinar on that, so I'm going to skip past that one. The next step we encourage people to be a part of, or encourage people to take, is to engage in a small group. In Romans 1, Paul says, I will learn from your faith and you will learn from mine. That a clear way in which we learn about how to be a disciple of Jesus Christ is through small groups and through relationships, and relationships are our key way in which our small groups are the key way we leverage relationships to help people grow into followers of Jesus Christ. The fourth step we encourage people to take is to practice prayer and sacraments. I think all of us would agree prayer is absolutely crucial to following Jesus. If we're not growing in prayer, if we're not practicing prayer, we're not going to grow as followers of Jesus Christ. And we say practice prayer and sacraments because we really believe that whatever you discover in prayer, that whatever God speaks to you in prayer, is a way you're supposed to put in practice in the rest of your life. And then our fifth step we talk about is share your faith. This means evangelization. This means developing relationships with people who do not yet have a relationship with Christ. And for most people, we already have those relationships, either at work or with our family members or friends. And then when appropriate, inviting them to come to church and be a part of our community. So these are the 5 steps we are constantly encouraging the members of our parish to take. Serve in ministry or missions, tithe and give, engage in a small group, practice prayer and sacraments, and share your faith. And so obviously this whole webinar is all about that second step, tithe and give. But it's just important that we put the context of money, we put money in the context of discipleship. There's a great temptation to divorce money and discipleship, or to just kind of think about getting people's money from them. But we want to say that we want to ground this when we talk about raising money, and really even more beyond that, raising givers. We want to ground it in discipleship. So I want to talk about that a little bit to help strengthen your understanding of how much money is connected to discipleship when you look at the scriptures. Because if you're like me and Father Michael, you didn't get a lot of teaching of that in either seminary or just going through Catholic education. So if we look at the parables of Jesus, so many different parables look at discipleship and money. Let me just name a few for you. In Luke 16, we learn about the parable of the dishonest steward. Remember, this steward is fired for not handling his master's money well. And at the end of that parable, Jesus gives the teaching of that. He says that money does not belong to you, it belongs to another, that you are a steward. And so you want to use the money you have in your hands for a little while in your own best interest by serving others. There is the parable of the rich fool, also found in Luke's gospel in Luke 12. And there's a guy, if you remember, who has a bumper crop. He decides he's going to, tear down his barn, build a bigger one, and just relax, enjoy life, eat, drink, and be merry. And it's almost like the American dream. But what does Jesus say about this guy? He says, "You fool," right? He's foolish. And the point is this, that it is foolish to spend all your money on you and not be rich towards God. And Jesus in that parable says we have to be aware of all forms of greed. There's another parable of the tenants. This is of the talents in Matthew 25, right? Remember, there's the 3 different servants. And the first 2 servants, they take the master's money and they invest it for the benefit of the master, to invest and to expand his kingdom, to expand his riches. And what does the third servant do? He takes the talent and he buries it in the ground. He doesn't invest it for the master. And the point of that parable, again, is to use God's money in a way that will advance God's kingdom and God's causes, so that we can hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." There's the parable of the judgment of the nations that follows right on the heels of that, in which Jesus praises all those people who've used their resources to help the poor, those who are hungry or thirsty or naked, right? And he says, "Blessed are you, come and enter into the house prepared, the place prepared for you by my Father." Then going back to Luke's gospel, there's the rich man and Lazarus. So these are just a few of the parables in which Jesus teaches about money. Then there are just basic teachings Jesus gives about money. In Matthew 6, he says, gives alms in secret. Don't let your left hand know your right hand know what you are doing. Also in Matthew 6, he says to give away money, then you will have treasure in heaven, to work for a storehouse in heaven. Also in Matthew 6, Jesus says this, where your heart is, or where your treasure is, there will your heart also be. In other words, Jesus teaches that wherever you spend your money your heart just goes along with it, right? If you think about, if you invest in a company, if you invest in, and you spend money into that company, invest that money, you care about that company all of a sudden. If you buy something, all of a sudden your heart is invested in it. For many years, I invested in my kids' Taekwondo. They're taking Taekwondo. And my one son got a black belt. But I had to pay for those lessons, whether they went or not. And so if I had found out on a night they were supposed to go to Taekwondo, they didn't go, I got very upset. Why? Because I was investing in their Taekwondo. And so where your money is, there will your heart also be. Matthew 23, another teaching on money. Jesus is in the midst of criticizing the Pharisees for their legalism, calling them hypocrites. But right in the middle of all this criticism, he actually stops to commend them for tithing. He says, you tithe on mint and cumin and dill, and these things you should have done. And then all the rest is critical of the Pharisees, but he compliments them for their tithing. Another teaching of Jesus that's found in all three synoptic gospels is to pay your taxes, to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. So we see Jesus, he taught about money in parables. He had just basic, simple teachings on money. And then he taught about the importance of money and discipleship just through the encounters he had with people. Think about the rich young man, that here he meets someone who comes up to Jesus and says, good teacher, what good must I do to inherit eternal life? And again, you're familiar with the teaching. Jesus, this encounter, Jesus says, well, love, take care of your parents. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. Do all, just follow the law and you're good. And the rich young man says, well, Jesus, I've done this all along. What more should I do? And then Jesus looked at him and loved him and told him to give away all his possessions, because he knew he was unduly connected to his possessions. That's on the one side of the socioeconomic spectrum. On the other side of the socioeconomic spectrum, we have the widow's mite. That all three synoptic gospels tell us that in the last week of Jesus's life, he stood at the temple and watched how people put money into the temple. And then he observes this one woman, a widow, put in just 2 small coins. All these other people put in huge sums of money. This woman puts in 2 little coins. And Jesus says she gave more than all the rest of them. Why? Because she gave from her substance and not from her extra. So Jesus is talking here and teaching here about this encounter of the importance of what we would say percentage giving, of giving from our substance. Think about this. Jesus praises the woman at Bethany who anoints him with a costly jar of oil. Again, shortly before his burial, shortly before he goes to the cross, this woman comes and anoints him, and people get upset and they say, well, this money could have been used to give to the poor. And Jesus says, stop criticizing her. Wherever the gospel is proclaimed, she will be remembered. And because her giving, her anointing was a way of worship. And again, the gospels tell us this was a costly jar of ointment, of oil. Think about Luke 19. Jesus meets Zacchaeus. And so we're all familiar with that story. Jesus is walking through the town of Jericho. He sees Zacchaeus up in the tree. He invites Zacchaeus to have dinner with him, says, let's have dinner together tonight. They meet for a while. And what happens at the end? Zacchaeus decides to give away half his money to the poor. And if he's defrauded anyone of anything, he promises to pay them back 4 times as much. The law said you needed to pay them a quarter more, 25% more. And he said he'll pay them 100%, 400% more. So all these encounters and more, we see that Jesus is connecting discipleship and money. And just going back to the Zacchaeus story, at the end of that, Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house. He sees that Zacchaeus, who had been a greedy and had sold out everything for money, was now willing to give it away because of the relationship he had with Jesus. So Jesus teaches on discipleship and money. We see this throughout. Then this continues through the Acts of the Apostles. If you read through Acts of the Apostles, I was just struck by this. We've been reading that as a church again. Obviously, we read it through the Easter season, but also just reading through the whole book as part of a challenge we have for our parish to read the New Testament. And I was just struck by how much discipleship is connected to giving, even more than receiving communion. It's the use of finances. Constantly it's there. Believers share all things so they meet the needs of one another. Barnabas sells all his property and puts it at the disciples' feet. In Acts 10, it tells us that Peter goes to the house of a Roman centurion. And why does God choose this Roman centurion? And God sends Peter to this Roman centurion to teach Peter that the gospel is not just for the Jewish people, but for the Gentiles. And he sends Peter to this one guy's house, to Cornelius. Why does he pick Cornelius? Because he gave liberally to the synagogue. He was a generous giver. God could have chosen anybody to be one of the first Gentiles to really hear that message or to connect Peter to, but he chooses a man who gives generously. Acts 11 tells us that the disciples determined that they should each give according to their ability to help fellow Christians in Judea who are suffering from a famine. Acts 19, these magicians come to a relationship with Christ. They come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And what's the first thing they do after they come to believe in Jesus? They burn their magic books. These magic books that were worth, I think, tens of thousands of pieces of silver. They were huge. They were their source of income. They were worth a whole bunch of money. The magicians burn them to say that's how committed they are to Christ. And then as we read through all the readings of Paul, and we could go on and on about these, but just to give you a few of them, 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, Paul takes 2 whole chapters in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 to talk about giving. And he's writing to the people of Corinth to prepare them for when he comes, that they will give generously and they will give freely and they will give intentionally, not under guilt or out of manipulation. The book of James says, don't put your trust in riches. Just the book of Revelation, Jesus is talking to the church of Laodicea and he's expressing frustration with them. And he says, you become lukewarm. Why they become lukewarm? Well, because they trust in their money more than they trust in him. And those are just some of the verses, but not all of how the New Testament connects how we handle money with discipleship. In our book, Church Money, we have a whole appendix that just lists as many verses as we could find in the New Testament about the connection of discipleship and money. So Jesus connected discipleship and money. The early church connected discipleship and money. We need to too. And so what I want to talk to you about now is how we do that. How do we connect discipleship and money? And then that will lead to decisions that will help us in this COVID crisis to raise giving in our parishes. In our book, we have a whole chapter on this. We have 9 ways towards raising givers. I'm only going to share 3. And then in our book, we have a whole chapter on developing high capacity givers and the importance of that. I'm just going to share a few thoughts on that right now. But how do we connect money and discipleship? Well, first of all, we need to connect it giving. We need to, first of all, just personally as a leader, we need to embrace this. As Father Michael said, kind of in those opening thoughts, leadership is so important to this. I forget who said it, but everything rises and falls on leadership. And it's true in how we handle our money and finances. And money is a leadership issue. So, and the first way we need to personally embrace it is how we're handling our own money. And are we doing that in a way, are we giving back to God and his church? Right now, I work with a bunch of parishes, but I'm working with one parish that had a fundraiser coming up in this summer. And this was a kind of a gathering that would have raised a pretty huge, substantial part, a pretty big part of their budget. It's money they absolutely needed. Well, of course, in the midst of the COVID crisis, they can't have this event. They can't do it. They had to decide to cancel it, but that leaves a big hole in their budget. And so what they've decided to do, and we've been talking, is they're going to send out a letter to their people and connect discipleship. But they're going to ask people to give a kind of one-time gift to help meet their needs. And so what I told this staff, this team is, before you send this letter out to the parish, and they directed them how to give, you need to give first. Nobody, this whole team, And I would even say your whole staff needs to give to support this before you ever send that letter out. So being a leader means, first of all, personally embracing that I need to give as a leader, that you need to give as a leader. Embracing this as a leader means that, again, we are raising money, but we like to say this way: we're not raising money, we're raising givers. And that is something that's not added on to your role as a leader. It is part of your role. It's implicit in your role as a leader, because money is a spiritual issue. It requires spiritual leadership. And again, Father Michael and I, neither of us got into church work to be about money. I know you didn't get into church work because you wanted to talk about money. You know, you probably didn't. If you were really interested in money, you probably would have got involved in business, or you would have got involved becoming an economist, or a bunch of other investment banker. There's all these other opportunities for careers out there for people who like to talk about money. But the reality, again, is we cannot be leaders and not address this issue. One, because we need money to fund our missions and ministry. And no matter who you are, you can't get away from. I can't get away from as a father. If I want to lead my family, I got to take care of it. If you want to lead your church family, you got to take care of it. But again, because money is a spiritual issue. And so I just think this is such an important part for us to embrace, because I know many people struggle, that they feel like when you talk about money, it is something that's a diversion from the mission. No, it is central to the mission, because our Savior talked about money. The early church addressed the issue of money, and we need to do so too. Also, I think,
about that, I'll just say about that, if you're a preacher, if you preach at your church or teach at your church, ask yourself a simple question. How often does money come up in the lectionary? And of course, the answer is quite often, all the time. So we address money and giving as often as it appears in the lectionary. We talk about giving to the parish only one time a year, but we talk about giving as worship and discipleship as often as it comes up.
And that actually goes right into the next point, is that you need to teach and preach about money. But let me just, before getting to that real quick, let me just say there is one temptation. When money is really tight, we have a great temptation to turn away from discipleship answers and towards quick fixes. And so just to acknowledge that, again, the parish I'm working with, the first answer was, well, let's do some other fundraisers, right? This fundraiser is not working because we can't gather. And even people in their parish are saying, well, here's some other fundraisers we could do. And again, to their credit, they stepped up, and conversations are like, no, we're gonna work away from the fundraiser and towards discipleship. So I would acknowledge there is a great temptation to forget about discipleship when money is tight, but you don't want to do that. Instead, going to the next one, you want to teach and preach about money. As Father Michael said, we want to preach about whenever it comes up in the lectionary. You want to connect the dots for people between money and discipleship. Again, and this takes a little bit of time, because most Catholics, we haven't had those dots connected. We've heard the church ask for money. We've been nagged for money. We've been told we should do it, but never connected to it's going to help us grow to be more fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. So you want to connect the dots for people, and you can do that and preach whenever it comes up. We have done series on money. If you're familiar with us, we take a scripture passage, and over a series of weeks, we look at that. We take a topic, and over a series of weeks, we look at the scripture passages and how they connect to that topic. And I know you might be thinking, are there really that many weeks in a row to talk about money? If you look pretty closely, it's there. We just did a series this fall, back in September, and there was about 4 weeks in a row where it's all, again, money is the main message, or is a major theme of the reading. So it is there. Another thing we do to try to help connect the dots for people between money and discipleship is something we've called giving moments. We will take a ministry of our church, where that might be children's ministry or student ministry or care for the sick, any of those kind of things. And we just produce about a minute video that talks about what that ministry does, how it helps and serves people, how it helps bring them to Christ. And then we just thank people for giving and saying, your giving makes this possible. Your giving makes it possible for us to invest in the next generation. Your giving makes it possible for us to serve people who are sick. Your giving makes it possible for us to have our music ministry, whatever it is. We connect the dots.
I would just say that if you're working in a parish, in whatever capacity, you know very well what your parish does and the breadth and the depth of your ministry. But you're probably overestimating what the average parishioner knows. When we show those giving moments, it never fails that people will come up to me and say, I had no idea we did all that. And if you can connect that to their giving, it's a very powerful incentive.
Yeah, it's been very helpful and very powerful. We show these right before, again, we head into the offertory song, right before we're taking up the offering. So again, people can connect the dots. In this time of COVID, we've either done giving moments, that these are produced videos, or we just had talking heads. We've just had somebody, one of our staff members, usually Brian Crook, who's on our team, stand up and say, now we're entering into the offertory, where we bring the bread and wine as an offering, but we also bring a financial sacrifice. And then again, share one ministry that's going on, or one story of life change that we've heard about. And just, again, connecting the dots for people that their giving makes these things happen. Again, we are talking about help in the lectionary doing that. I think in this time now of digital age, where everything again is digital for most people, you don't have to wait for the lectionary to come up with an idea for that. You could start implementing a series of videos of just 1 or 2 minute reflections on something Jesus said about giving, and connecting that to discipleship. Send out an email to people about what Jesus said about money. And so begin training people and teaching people in that way. Again, so all of communication now is coming to us digitally, and probably as churches, we didn't take a lot of time to do that before. Now it's one of the only ways we can really communicate with people. So make use of that. Don't waste this crisis, and instead communicate with people about what Jesus said about money. And then another way we want to teach people is just dripping into every communication about giving, the connection between giving and discipleship. Again, it's been said that vision leaks, that we fill people up and we tell people things, but it is dripping. There's like a hole, and we try to fill up their buckets with it, their bucket of knowledge, but there's holes in that bucket. We have to keep filling it up. And so anytime you send out a communication about giving, thanking people, or just letting people know about your budget, the IRS end of your statements, it should never just be about that kind of operational thing. There should always be, again, a drip or a little nod or a little connection towards how giving is helping them and helping others grow as disciples. So any communication you send out to donors, make sure you're connecting the dots for them, the connection between giving and discipleship. So again, if you want to connect money to discipleship, you need to give as a leader, you need to teach and preach about it, and you need to ask. And how you ask matters. Again, a lot of times in the church, how are we asking for money? Please, 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 we need your money, so help us. And people do not give to neediness. I mean, they might give once, but on a long, sustained effort, they do not give to neediness. They give to vision. You need to be vision casting. And again, what does that mean? Again, you need to tell people about the impact it's going to have on their lives and the impact it's going to have on the lives of others. So paint a picture of what it will do in their lives and how it will positively impact them. When it comes to how Jesus motivated people to move, I'm amazed how much Jesus kind of used one of two methods most of the time, right? Because he would either sometimes he would tell them their identity, right? Think of the Sermon on the Mount. He says to them, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. That's who you are. That's your identity. And light of being light for the world and salt of the earth, here's now how you should live. And that is one way in which we can move people. And we can tell people to give. Hey, this is who you are. You're a giver. You want to be generous. But another way Jesus invites people to give to would always be to tell them the rewards. And look over and over again, whenever Jesus challenged somebody, he told them about the rewards. Again, going back to the rich young man, Jesus did not say to the rich young man, okay, here's what you got to do. Take all your money and give it to the poor, and then you'll be broke. Too bad, so sad, go call your dad. You won't have any money. It's not what he said. Jesus said, take all your money, give to the poor, and then you will have treasure in heaven. Jesus said, you're going to get something. There is a reward for this. It's treasure in heaven. The times in the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus says to give to the poor, give alms to the poor, he says, give in secret, and then your Father who sees in secret will reward you in secret. Right? Jesus constantly tells people there's a reward for doing what he asks us to do, which includes giving. Now, again, the prosperity gospel would say you give to get, or you give and you'll get money back. And of course, that's not the case. But Jesus always promises some kind of reward. Often the reward is that we grow closer to God. Often the reward of giving is that we feel more at peace in our minds and our hearts, because the giving reminds us we are not the source of our money. God is, and God promises to provide for us and care for us. Often reward of giving, of course, is what we talked about, is that it brings an impact. It changes people's lives. So don't be afraid to let people know there is a reward, and vision cast that for them. And again, vision cast for them by telling them the impact it will make on others. Share the difference that giving is making in the lives of others. Again, we talked about that through those giving moments. Connect the dots of what the programs are going to do for what you're able to do for others and how their giving funds those programs. I was just listening.
In other words, another way of talking about that is investment. That they are making an investment in the parish. They're making an investment in the people the parish serves through their ministry, and they're making an investment in their own future. And we would argue it's the very best investment that anybody can make with their money. Absolutely, because it's an investment that, again, is stored for us in heaven that cannot be taken away from us. And when you see the market crashing the way it's done recently, that's a much better investment than the stock market. I was listening to just today, an interview with Scott Harrison, who's formed Charity Water, and it's a great organization, and he knows how to raise money. And he just talked about how so many even big charities just miss this, the importance of saying that the two most important things people care about is they want to know where their money went, they want to know that it was used well, and they want to know the impact. So that people distrust charities, and I think they distrust churches because they're afraid their money is being wasted and they don't see the impact. And so as a church, we want to tell them, hey, this is the impact your money is having, and it'll help people be more confident in giving. And then the fourth way of connecting money to discipleship, again, I just want to say, is engage your top donors. That this is so important. Right after the crisis hit, we reached out to our top 25 to 50 donors, somewhere around in that range, just to check in with them. And that would be, if you have not done that yet, I would really encourage you to do so. And some of you might say, I don't even know who my top 25 to 50 donors are. Get that information quick. You obviously have it, and then start having some conversations. But let me just encourage you this. Your first ask is not for money. It's about checking in and giving a lot of gratitude, of just saying, hey, thank you for what you've done for us in the past, and how we're able to keep funding our ministry right now because of what you've done. And I'm going to get to this in a few moments, but let them know of any cuts you're making. That's good. If you cut spending or decide to cut spending, you don't even need to say specifics, but hey, here's what we're not doing right now because of this crisis. And the reason that's helpful is because they're in businesses, and their businesses are making cuts right now. They might be making cuts to their own life, and they see that you're making cuts to your own budget as a parish. It's going to help them have greater confidence in you.
again, remind them of the impact that you've had. So I just want to share one story. We reached out to someone who's a major giver, also on our parish council, and we spoke to her. And again, we just checked in. We just thanked her for what she's done, and that was it. And she actually connected with a different staff member lately, and she said, I was honestly waiting for the ask, because everybody else who calls me is calling me to ask for something. And she just said how happy she was that we were just calling to talk to her and ask how we could pray for her. So I would do that in your calls too. Just, is there any way we can be praying for you right now? And just one other thing, again, you're not the only one calling major donors, because other people are as well. So again, you want to make sure you have a plan for the future, or let them know, again, anything you're doing right now to help with your financial health.
Let me just say a word about the phrase major donors. When we say that, you might think we're talking about rich people. And maybe in your parish, you don't have rich people, and so you're willing to discount that category. Whatever kind of parish you have, and whatever the economics of your community, there are people who are leaders when it comes to giving in your parish, because they give more, or they give at a higher percentage than the rest. And those leaders deserve some special attention. Does that mean that they're better Catholics than everybody else? Does that mean that you should be serving them and nobody else? No, that's not what this is about. This is about you as a leader cultivating other leaders, in this case, giving leaders, and making an investment in them as they make an investment in your parish. Who are these people? You should know them. You should be in contact with them. You should be transparent with them when it comes to your finances and your financial decisions. Ask their opinion about what you're doing and what's going on.
Yeah, really good, Father Michael. So just last part here, then we'll go to questions. Lessons we've learned during this COVID crisis, what we're doing right now. First of all, I have free spending. Probably should have even I changed in my notes after listening to Scott Harrison talk today, cut spending. That we need to cut any unnecessary spending right now. We've done that as a parish. If you have not done that yet, I really encourage you to make that your first action step after this webinar, and be willing to sacrifice. As I said, there some things you need to sacrifice. We have a few things some things we've already sacrificed for next year's budget. Some things we're on the chopping block that are really near and dear to our hearts, and Brandon, our team's going to have a heart-to-heart with Father Michael later this week about some of those things that he knows he loves, but we're going to have to be either on the chopping block or ready to cut them for the future, because again, we don't know what's coming. And so to preserve the life of our parishes, we need to cut spending right now. Again, just for a season or a while, but during this crisis. Second, this is a little bit out of order from my notes, but we have returned mailer envelopes. If you've not mailed out to people who are envelope givers, send them a letter asking them to give electronically, to sign up for electronic giving, and to let them know, I know this sounds ridiculous, but let them know you will receive their gift via mail, that you are getting mail. Your office can accept that. Again, you might have already done this, but if you haven't done it, make sure you do that. Michael, do you want to add anything to that? Because you were kind of...
We sent out a special mailer to our in-pew envelope givers. And in that mailer, we included envelopes, pre-addressed envelopes, back to the parish. And we just thanked them for their past support, and we left it at that. And that has been one of the most successful things that we've done in this crisis. People will use those envelopes. People will return those envelopes. We get a stack of them every single day in the mail. And that's one way that you can capture your in-pew giving that might be elusive right now because there's nobody in your pews.
Yeah, I think we had to make some investment in that. In the very first check you opened up, paid for the investment we had to make in that mailer.
The mailer cost us $1,000, and the very first envelope, return envelope, had $1,000 check in it, so it paid for itself.
Another thing we've learned about the importance of video communication during this time. So one thing I've started doing is a thing, I hate this name, I did not make up this name, but we do a thing called homilies right now. These homilies, homilies, anyway. They are little videos about 2 minutes a day of me just reading a verse of scripture and then praying for people and praying with people and helping them to kind of pause in their day. I've received more positive feedback on that than almost anything I've ever done here in the parish. And I just think it's because people are hungry for connection. So and again, we have somebody that helps us do that. You can do this with your iPhone. If you have an iPhone, you can do this. Send out more video messages, connect with your people, and especially your donors in this way. People are hungry to connect with others in this COVID crisis. So the connection will help, again, feed the relationship, because people give to vision and people give to people. And so I'm sure that, and again, the purpose of those homilies, these little prayers, is nothing to do with raising givers or fundraising, but I know it will help with that long term. And Father Michael's done some videos out to givers and donors, just saying hello, talking about a little update. And again, they've all been positively received. Next thing you see up there is promote text to give. This is big. Before the crisis, we had started playing around with encouraging texting to give. Weren't a ton of people doing it. Now it is the bottom rung on the ladder. It is, we say, if you are not a giver and want to give to support our church, text to give. That is the easiest way to give. And one of the reasons we promote it is because even though our mass is in Facebook and YouTube and these other places, if people text to give rather than click on a give button or something like that, the text to give is the easiest way. They can just have their phone, and then we already automatically kind of can capture their information to kind of keep in relationship with them. Text to give, I know some people have questions about that. How do I do that? How do I set that up? If you already have an online provider for your giving, to help with your electronic giving, they most likely provide that service. So just contact them. Next one, again, is we've talked about, but call major donors. If you've not put that into your process, put that on your calendar. Even as I say that, Father Michael and I, we were really good about this in the beginning of the crisis, and we've fallen off. And probably after this webinar, we're going to get back to doing it because it's so important. So make sure you call major donors. Call 1 or 2 a day again, and just have some conversations and connect, so they know you're out there. And I've already talked about that, so I'll keep going. Communicate during the Mass. So assuming your church, like our church, your Mass is only online right now, or even if you're moving towards opening up, guess what? Your online campus is probably going to be your bigger campus for the foreseeable future. A lot of people, even stalwart churchgoers, are not coming back anytime soon. They're too scared. Again, you might not like that reality, but it is the reality. So make sure during your Mass, again, right before your offertory, you have a moment in which you encourage people. Again, we would say encourage them to text to give. Make sure in that moment, again, you're connecting the dots between what you're doing and discipleship. And then last, I have, making giving easy on your website. So I would encourage you, after this webinar, after you cut your spending, but even something you could do right before that, is you go to your website and try to give to your parish. Go to your website. Now, what you should have is give in the top right-hand corner, because that's where the eye goes. If it's not there, it needs to move there. But try to give to your parish and just see how easy it is, because you want to make that as easy and as it possible. And so if it's not very easy and you're struggling to give, guess what? Others are struggling to give as well. So I would encourage you to talk to your tech people from there. You can look at our website, churchandtivy.com, how we do it. Again, look at some other sites to figure out how to make giving as easy as possible on your website and electronically. That's my last thought. Just one last thought, then we'll turn it back over to you, Aaron, in questions. Is that, there is a lot of stuff coming at us in the news, and so much of it is just bad news, right? And there's the COVID crisis, and of course, as Father Michael talked about, these riots and other crises that have taken place, and all of that. But I want you to be encouraged that, and so it can feel overwhelming, but God is still in control. God has a plan for your parish in this crisis, and God wants to use it to make disciples. We still have the same mission, even though the whole environment has changed. Our mission has not changed. God still is calling you to make disciples, and if that is His mission for you, God will provide the funding, because again, God is the source of the giving. You know, we have donors and we have things we are supposed to do, and we have work to do. But let's not forget, God is the source of the giving. He's the source of all good things. He's the source of our ministry. So let's continue to place our faith and trust in Him. We'll do what we can do, and we'll trust God to provide the grace to do what only God can do. And that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Wonderful. Let's see. Okay. Well, thank you for that message of hope that is most helpful during these times. I encourage everybody now to send in a question for Father Michael and Tom. I really appreciate your reminder to us of the biblical foundations of giving, and that it is tied to discipleship. I really think that, and I know you do, is an important component as we are creating givers and asking for money to fund our mission. So thank you for that. These lessons that you learned during the COVID pandemic, was this a difficult time for you? How were you able to come together with these? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Aaron, I think that the most difficult and challenging aspect of it initially and moving forward is the uncertainty of it all. We had no idea what to expect week 1 or week 2, or even now when it comes to giving. Our own personal experience has been that giving has remained solid through the period, and we're grateful for that. But of course, there's so many unknowns. And so, as Tom said, even today in our leadership team meeting, we were recommitting ourselves to freezing spending, to cutting spending.
Yeah, and I think again, there's a lot of stress to this situation, especially in the first few weeks. And now I think the longer it goes, I think there's still stress. So I think that's the hard thing of just kind of trying to lead yourself in that. And I think on these lessons are things we have been able to put in place right away, and are continue to learn. I think for all of us, there's a reaction to this, and so maybe other parishes have reacted and put some of these things in place. I think the next step, and I didn't add that, would be we now need to systematize it, that it needs to now become ingrained, because I think in the beginning it was sort of like, okay, we got to do this real quick, even with like online church and online mass, we got to do this real quick and get this up and running. But now, and maybe it's just a short-term solution, it's just a bridge to something else, but now I think we can see it's going to be a bit longer. How long, nobody knows. But when it comes to encouraging the giving and electronic and text to give and all these things we talked about, contacting donors, we need to make this a kind of a part of they may make it a habit and part of our schedules.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parishes are online pre-COVID, and many, many more have caught up to speed and gotten online during this crisis. But I would just urge pastors and parish staff not to think about that as a short-term proposition, but to think about that and your investment in that for the long term. Or at the very least, many of your parishioners will not be able to come back or will not feel comfortable coming back to church for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And you want to stay connected to them. But we also talk a lot about your online presence as your new front door for newcomers and visitors. So please don't underestimate its importance.
Thank you. Larry asked, what percentage of your givers do you designate as top givers, and how many households does this represent for Nativity?
I mean, I would just look at raw numbers of, again, you should look somewhere your top 100 givers, right, in your parish. Whatever giving amount that is, know who they are, be pretty familiar with who they are. So that's kind of just a number. That's pretty much a random number. It could be as much as you want or as little as you want, but those people, you should know who they are. And again, we've been saying it's top 25 to 50 to reach out to. Again, as the crisis continues, I'd even say the top 100. And again, that's all relative towards a parish, right? It depends on the parish's income about what that threshold is. But again, there is top 100 people in your parish. You should know who they are and have a connection with them.
And I'll just add to that personally, this is my own personal choice. I don't know how much people give. I choose not to know that, because when I see a parishioner, I don't want to be looking at a dollar sign, either positive or negative. But I do know who those top donors are, and I'm communicating to them and thanking them on a regular basis.
No, I'm the opposite. I know what they give. And every week we get a report of who's giving, and I'm looking at the top page or two just again to have my finger on that pulse. So it doesn't have to be the pastor, but somebody should.
Right.
And somebody should be doing that. And sometimes it's for pastoral reasons. If somebody's giving and suddenly they're not giving, what's going on? Are they still there? Is there something wrong? Could you reach out to them and find out? It's valuable information for sure.
And for top donors, is it also people who give consistently, even?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, so it depends. Some people are going to give once a year, especially kind of the new tax laws over the last couple of years. A lot more people are giving once a year, or even some people every other year because of those laws. Yeah, again, you're going to have all kinds of people. You have people who are just really sacrificial people that are probably giving regularly. Yes, it's because they don't have a lot of wealth, but they give from their substance, like the poor widow. And we certainly, and some people, they have more they have more net worth and are giving just higher numbers in lump sums usually. So, but not all. But you got to. That's where you got to pay attention. That's where you got to know kind of what's going on.
Sure. So Tom, you were saying that you are working with a parish and you work with many parishes. For people who might not know about that, would you want to talk a little bit more about that, about Rebuilt Parish?
Sure. Yeah, if you go to rebuiltparish.com, we've actually just launched a brand new website. You can find out a little bit there. We have members, Rebuilt Parish members, where we have resources and things like that. And then right now, we've been running some small groups for people to get involved. We've kind of had a tack there too, like everybody else we're trying to tack. So we've been doing our own webinars. We got one tomorrow. We've been doing one every single Wednesday, not to be in competition with you guys, but every Wednesday we have a webinar about what we're learning in the midst of this crisis at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And we're running small groups, and I do some coaching with parishes as well.
And the webinars are just for members of the Rebuilt Parish, or no? They're
Anybody can join it. Yeah, rebuiltparish.com for more. And we have Facebook groups as well. Okay. No, it's out there for anybody who wants to be a part of it. And we decided we're going to the end of June, then we're going to take a little break and then come back in July, at the end of July, and keep doing webinars, because we know everybody's just learning, and we're just sharing what we're learning here at the parish and passing that on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us to join that.
Great, my pleasure.
Yeah, so we know how important this topic is. We know the struggle that many parishes have right now. So we wanted to offer you kind of a different promotion or a discount on ChurchMoney. So $12 each for 1 to 4 copies using code ChurchMoney12, or for 5 and more copies, you could get them for $10 each. And we also would add free shipping on that, so using code ChurchMoney10. So you definitely refer to a lot of things that I know you go more in depth in the book, so that would be very
And
valuable.
Aaron, I would just say that I would encourage pastors to think about sharing this book with their parish council, with their staff, with their financial council, because the more people that you can get, headed in the same direction, according to the same plan, the faster and further you're going to go.
Most definitely. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We always appreciate when you join us and share your experience and expertise with us. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and I will send you an email tomorrow with the link to the recording. Another great thing to share with your parish. I know I shared the last one with my parish, the last one that you presented, so that's another great thing to do too. And please join us next week with Nick Wagner and Diana McCallantal of Team RCIA. They're going to be talking about, what RCIA is going to look like in the future, and the positive changes that can come from the COVID-19 pandemic. So once again, thank you all for coming, and have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Aaron.
Thanks.